Welcome to the Boys State Tournament edition of Preps Plus Extra. How you doing this week? I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Hanging in there for me this week, J.R. Ratcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you feeling?
We're busy, man. We've got 5 teams just in our coverage area that are going to the state tournament in boys basketball. A couple that we didn't expect to be there either, and then the Milwaukee area in general, because our coverage area doesn't include Wisconsin Lutheran and Milwaukee King. 7 teams from the greater Milwaukee area will head up to Madison, the Kohl Center, in pursuit of the gold ball this weekend.
Yeah, 7 of 20. And 2 of those teams are from the Woodland, which I guess if we opened the tournament and said, you know, there's going to be a team from the area that's going to have 2 teams in the state tournament, maybe we would have talked about the North Shore and Bay and Germantown and, you know, maybe the city, you know, somehow got 2, you know, through. But it's the Woodland, the wild, wacky Woodland. They're always surprising us with, usually it's just the unpredictable nature of their conference. But, you know, this year, you know, obviously they've had 2 great runs. Greendale knocked off undefeated Mount Horeb on Saturday. That's probably the big upset of the weekend.
Yeah, and I think if we had said, well, the Woodland is going to be the conference, name those 2 teams, there's no way we would have come up with Greendale and Brown Deer. We would have had New Berlin Eisenhower, Milwaukee Pius, Pewaukee might have been in the mix there. I mean, there were a lot of good teams in that league, and a lot of them I think we saw as state caliber teams, and maybe overlooked Brown Deer and Greendale. Like you said with Greendale, with their, I mean, they beat a 3 seed or a 2 seed, I believe, and then 3 number 1 seeds. And granted, that doesn't mean those teams are great. It just depends on where they rank in their corner of the sectional. But they beat some pretty highly regarded teams, including an undefeated squad, to get to state. Jordan Perez is kind of finally now getting this buzz as maybe the best sort of unsigned senior in the state of Wisconsin, or one of the best, as a guy who doesn't have a home next year for where to play basketball, but a guy who averages well over 20 points per game. And Josh Michaels is averaging greater than 20 points in the playoffs. There's a 6'2 guard. Perez is a 6'4 playmaking guard. So they've got some talent. And both of these teams, Greendale and Brown Deer, you kind of go back now, at least I do, and look at their schedules and see how in the world did we sort of miss seeing that they were capable of getting all the way to the state tournament. And especially with Brown Deer, I mean, their schedule was really, really good. The losses they have are all very high quality losses, and you kind of realize, okay, well, they were just behind some really great teams, but both of them had strong seasons, have a lot of talent, and now they're going to state. Yeah,
you know, and the thing with Brown Deer, you kind of touched on their schedule, which kind of put them behind the 8 ball early in terms from a record standpoint. They had 4 or 5 relatively early losses that sort of put them off the radar. You know, I think also not having a chance, you know, being in the East Division, not having a chance as much to butt heads with the Pius, which, let's be honest, the West was the stronger half of that league this year. You know, so those kind of combined, you know, them being, and then realizing, you know, they go down to Division III, you know, as opposed to being Division II with most of the rest of the league. You know, those are some of the factors that kind of jumped, you know, kind of make them, you know, I guess, you know, make them get overlooked a little bit. But now you look at them going into Division III, you know, with the front line of, you know, 6'9" Devontae Jackson, 6'6" Jerry Luckett. You know, they got a nice guard, Lorenzo Byers, Zach Bond. I mean, this team, you know, they might not be done Friday. Right. You know, they could be moving on till Saturday.
And I think they play Roncalli, if I'm not mistaken, right? A team that shoots a ton of 3-pointers. So their big men are good. That's probably one of the better 1-2 post combos we have in the area. But it's going to be about those guards defending the perimeter, making sure Roncalli doesn't get tons of shots off. And if they do, they get a chance to play in the sectional, or I should say the state championship game.
Yeah, now, one thing I am sure of, Greendale plays Rice Lake, and, you know, I don't know if we touched on Henry Ellenson. If not, most people who follow high school basketball in the state know of the kid from Rice Lake, Henry Ellenson, who's, you know, got all these big time colleges, you know, Wisconsin, you know, North Carolina, all these other schools sort of interested in him. You know, that's the team that Greendale is going to face in the state semifinal. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to see if they can kind of keep the magic going, so to speak.
Yeah, we talked about him briefly when Rice Lake ended up playing Dominican over the holidays in the Wisconsin basketball yearbook shootout. How that was going to be such a great matchup between Dominicans, Diamond Stone, and Ellenson, and Rice Lake won that game. They got the better of that one. They've got a really good schedule. I think right now a lot of people look at Rice Lake as sort of the team to beat. It's hard to tell because you've got a team from one side of the state, a couple teams from this side of the state. There's not a lot of cross-pollination there when you look at their schedules, so it's difficult to draw any conclusions, and certainly we've been surprised at what happens when you get up to the state tournament before. There's a couple Division II outcomes in my mind just off the top of my head that really surprised me. So I'm interested in seeing him play. I've never personally seen Ellenson play, and I'm really curious to see how he stacks up with some of the best that the area has to offer.
Yeah, he'll be one of the many stars at the standouts at the state tournament. But since we're talking Woodland basketball, it's probably fitting that we throw to the video we have of Brown Deer right after they won the sectional title last week.
We're like best friends off the court and on the court. We're family. We all start together. We do things together. Everything is a family.
Man, all the work was, man. At first, it looked like it was nothing. It looked like we was just waking up in the morning for no reason. But when it paid off, I thank Appleby for that.
Yeah, anytime you go to state, it's a huge thing for the community. So it's great that I'm a Brown Deer guy. I'm from Brown Deer. So to take this team back to the state in '02, that was the last time they were there, and then to take them back now, that's something special.
Well, we touched on the Woodland, but the other. I won't say big news, but the must-see event of the state tournament is in Division I. Mm-hmm. Some team called Germantown. I don't know if have they ever done anything upstate before?
Oh man, I don't know. You're asking me to dig into my recesses here.
And
they did win the state title last year and the year before, and they didn't lose a game either time.
Oh, okay. So that's a nice resume there. Milwaukee King, another team that's quite familiar with state tournament trips. Sure. Really, this is their third straight year at the state tournament as well. Another. We've had a few battles of the ages or battles of the year, and this is another one. I mean, what's your initial thoughts on that matchup there?
I think when Brookfield Central played Germantown earlier this year, we thought there couldn't be a bigger battle. And then Brookfield Central faced Milwaukee King in the sectional semifinal, and King in overtime snaps their undefeated run through the season. Really just an impressive performance by King to get to the sectional final, where they then had to survive double overtime to beat Racine Case. So I think the real question is, which path would you rather have? Would you rather be Jim Gauze having to fight tooth and nail to get through that sectional, even though Milwaukee King is easily one of the best 3 to 5 teams in the state, no question. And then you get to a point here where you're facing Germantown, who hasn't been tested in the sectional. And I mean, nothing against Sussex Hamilton or Kimberly, the teams that they faced in the sectional. Very good basketball teams, but as it played out on the court, Germantown didn't have to fight. They didn't have to go to overtime. They didn't need a last-second possession. So here they are at the state tournament, not having really played a meaningful, well, I shouldn't say meaningful, but not having to play a close game in a long time.
Yeah, so, to answer your question, what team would I rather be? I guess I would rather be King because, at this point, going into the game, at least, they got to feel pretty invincible.
No kidding.
I mean, they got to feel that, hey, there's nothing, that they could have faced or, during the tournament that's, from a pressure standpoint, is going to be more than, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, these last 2 games are a good test for the pressure they'll experience at the state tournament. I mean, I guess I'd also wouldn't mind being King just from the standpoint that I still think that, as the 2-time defending champion, Germantown is still, at least probably the favorite in most people's eyes. And until someone beats them in the tournament, you got to kind of call them the favorite. Yeah. So even though, King's got these great victories over Brook Central and Racine Case, Coach Jim Gauze can go in this week and he can still play that underdog, mentality. Like, hey, we still got to keep it going.
And keep in mind, a lot of those kids were on last year's team that went into the semifinals as a pretty significant favorite against McGuanago and wound up getting beaten pretty solidly in that semifinal game, which I think surprised a lot of people. I think a lot of people were looking forward to another Germantown King battle. The year before, that state championship game came down to the last possession. So there's plenty of fuel in the tank for the kids who remember that both last year and the year before.
Yeah, and then real quick from the Germantown perspective, I mean, it's been documented that this has been a rocky year at times for that program, and I think, having a couple losses, at times, some of that adversity, maybe in the long run it gives them that, that little extra something that, I think they had, the last couple years where that little chip on their shoulder. So it's going to be must-see TV. It's one of those games that if I weren't there sitting, writing my story and working, I want to watch it anyway because it's going to be fantastic.
That's the 6:30 game at 8:15. It's kind of too bad that a couple teams got relegated to the undercard in D1, and they're the second game. McGuanago making a return trip to the state tournament. They face a Neenah team that's 25-1, a very, very good Neenah team. And McGuanago we talked about, they had a nice sectional, good opportunity for them. They won in overtime against Sun Prairie in the sectional final. The top seed Madison Memorial had gone down earlier in the tournament, so a good situation for McGuanago, and now they're headed back as well.
Yeah, and speaking of teams that are headed back, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that Whitefish Bay Dominican is on its way back to state. Going
Heavy favorites for D4
Yeah,
again.
in Division 4, going for its third straight state title, just as Germantown is as well. And Wisconsin Lutherans back in Division 2. They were finalists last year, lost to Pulaski. You know, it seems like they're really driven to get back this year and maybe come out with the trophy. And really speaking of the Vikings, let's hear what they had to say after they beat Milwaukee in the sectional final last week.
Feels real good to go back there again. Hopefully we can get the job done this time and win the championship, bring that gold ball home.
Yeah, we just got to, we want to do it for the seniors last year. We know that hurt them real bad, so we just want to go out and fight for it.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Preps Plus Extra. But before we get out of here, we want to wish Brookfield Central coach Mark Adams a great retirement. He just announced his retirement earlier this week. So congratulations on that, Coach. And as far as us, we'll see you next week when we'll talk about the girls' state tournament. Till then, I'm Mark Stewart. That's J.R. Radcliffe. Enjoy the game.